Hola, minasan. Welcome back for another round of Warhammer research. Viewer recommended, this time from Ordendo Gravetto. Thank you for the recommendation. This is from WesHammer. What do the Orks think of every other faction? What do they think of every other faction? That's a very fascinating thing. And a nice little change of pace in lore, in the lore research. You know, what do other factions think of each other? And to see what the Orks do, hey, why not? Yeah, and then hopefully we'll get into the Warhammer Fantasy. I noticed one that's very Japan based, and I'm gonna take a look at that one in the future. But for now, we gotta get through another fun orc thing. Another fun orc thing. I have been serenaded by the fans that I'm an orc fan. It's official. It's official. I am greatly honored. Thank you all. Thank you. I'm having so much fun with the orcs. You have no idea. Boy. It's gonna be great to see what their thought process is. So WesHammer channel, make sure to click on the links in the description below and show your support for WesHammer. And to call the action, comment, like, subscribe, follow, hit the notification bell. Let us proceed with the research.
According to recent polls,
maybe I should have gone with this one. There we go.
data that I just made up, there isn't. According to recent polling data that I just made up, there isn't a single 40k fan in existence that doesn't love the Orks. If they say they don't, they're either lying or they hate fun. And if that's you, who hurt you? Now, part of the charm of 40k as a franchise is how bleak, dark, and comically serious it often takes itself. But right when it's all starting to feel a little too depressing, the Orks come in like a giant green wrecking ball, ready to inject some much-needed humor into the grimdark future. And what's not to love about these guys? They're a bunch of Cockney football hooligans. They don't care about taking territory, they're not trying to build some grand empire, they don't even have an agenda to push. The only thing the Orks care about is fighting. And in their pursuit of getting into ever more crazy scraps, they've spread to every corner of the galaxy in order to give all of the other factions a, quote, proper kicking. But what do the Orks think of all those other factions? Do they think they're a bunch of weaklings and cowards, or do they have a lot of admiration for groups that can hold their own in a fight? Do they look at a species like, say, the Tau, who specialize in ranged warfare, as a bunch of cowards, or do they appreciate their taste in DACA?
Have you tried more DACA?
On factions like
have some DACA.
The Eldar, the Tyranids, Chaos, or the Imperium? Which ones do they like fighting against the most? And dare I say it, have any of them actually managed to earn the Orcs' respect? What about some of the gods in this universe? Like
good question.
The Emperor? Do they respect them as avatars of war, or think they're a bunch of wimps waiting to get pasted by Gork and Mork? We're gonna get into all that and a whole lot more in this video.
Yeah, I don't believe that they see fighting as fighting. I think they see fighting as partying. Like to them it's like one big party, one big celebration, a total orgy, you know, a fest orgy. It's like orgy. I do not believe for 1 minute they don't see them as legit enemies, but as party pals. You know what I mean? They come with the solo cups full of rum and coke, and tell all the other factions, start drinking up. We're gonna wild out. And you see like the Space Marines, the Tyranids, all of them, all with the solo cups, just drinking away with the orcs, and then all of a sudden they start fighting. They have a fight orgy, and then the orcs leave, saying, "Yeah, that was one heck of a party." Meanwhile, the other factions are like, "What the heck just happened?" Like, what's with these solo cups? Why do we have solo cups full of rum and coke? They have no idea what happened. All they know is that they got bruises and solo cups full of rum and coke.
I probably don't need to tell you this, but Warhammer 40k can get pretty dark. The Milky Way galaxy of the 41st millennium is one where hatred and loathing have been allowed to fester and spread unchecked through the minds and hearts of nearly every spacefaring species. When we try to measure how they all feel about each other, it's ultimately an exercise in splitting hairs over who they each hate the most. But right at the moment we're about to give up hope that anybody could be having a good time in the grim dark future, we're introduced to everyone's favorite boys.
Yeah.
A bunch of fighting obsessed Cockney.
Oh, that's so
who
cool.
rampage across
This
the galaxy
animation.
looking for a good scrap to get stuck in. If you know anything about 40k, I don't need to tell you just how amazing and hilarious they are, even if the people in universe absolutely hate them. They're like a hurricane of violence that carves a bloody path across the stars and kills anyone that gets in their way. But from our perspective, they seem to have a pretty good sense of humor about the whole thing. Their passion for fighting
I just
is
love this
pretty
argument
damn
these two are
infectious.
having.
The funny thing about orcs is that all of the fighting they do isn't motivated by hatred for their enemies like most other species.
Exactly, they're party dudes.
Hate is kind of a foreign emotion to the orcs. They have no concept of what it's like to hate something. Now sure, there's things they don't like much or maybe find annoying, but they have a simple and elegant solution for that. They just fight those things, which is what they love to do and thus what they assume everybody else in the universe loves as well. And speaking of fighting, it's pretty much the only thing that the orcs care about. You gotta remember that they were created 60 million years ago by the old ones as living weapons to fight against the Necrons. Every single aspect of them, all the way down to their genetics, was designed for combat. Fighting isn't just something they enjoy, it's everything to them. It is a biological need in much the same way that food or drink is for us. Because
That's
of this,
true.
the lens that the orcs view their galactic neighbors through is almost always framed by how good of a scrap they can give the boys. Now, what the orcs actually think about all of the other species they routinely go up against is admittedly one of those topics that isn't nearly as fleshed out as it could be. Insight into orc philosophy used to be pretty rare until we started getting all of the Mike Brooks orc novels that were written from their perspective. So Brutal Cunning,
okay.
War Boss, and Big Daka, as well as a bunch of short stories and the orc codexes, are going to serve as the primary sources for all of the information in this video.
Okay.
And because this script was made using sources almost exclusively written from their perspective, I'm going to do honor to the orcs and use all of their preferred names for different factions. I'll explain them as we go, but real quick, humans are known as humies, space marines are beakies, all Eldar are scrawnies or pansies in the older lore, and their dark Eldar variant is known as the spikies. Tau are fish heads or fish boys, Tyranids are bug eyes, Necrons, and pretty much all robots for that matter, are known as tin heads, tin boys, the tins, or the tinnies. Chaos Space Marines are the Chaos Lads with the spikes, and my personal favorite, demons are known as, quote, Chaos Griblies. We're going to
Okay, sorry guys, but I'm gonna need to rewind back and write down all of the factions here. What they're known as, because that's pretty big.
As we go, but real quick, humans are known as humi.
Humies, the humans.
Space Marines are
The Space Marines are beakies. I thank you for your patience, but this is very important.
all Eldar
are scrawnies and pansies. That is hilarious. Scrawnies and pansies.
Are scrawnies or pansies in the older lore, and their Dark Eldar variant.
Dark Eldars are the spikies. I like everything is an E, has E's in it. Spikies, darkies, humies. That's funny. Everything is a E. Spikies.
variant is known as the spikies. Tau are fish heads or fish boys.
Hey, that's inconsistent. They should be fishies. They should be called the fishies. Why are they not the fishies? Fish heads and fish boys. We'll find out why. Well, we're gonna find out why they see them like that.
Tyranids are bug eyes.
They should be buggies, not bug eyes. And I'm being too alliterative, aren't I? Why not be alliterative?
Necrons, and pretty much all robots for that matter, are known as tin heads, tin boys, the tins, or the tinnies.
See, the tinnies, you know, and that's a lot of nicknames for a bunch of cyborgs. The tins and tinnies and the tinnies. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. The Necrons. The Phyrexians of Warhammer.
Chaos Space Marines are the Chaos Lads with the spikes.
Gosh, that's a mouthful. Chaos Space Marines. I love that. I love the characterization of the Orks. You know, they that they have a distinct nicknames for everybody. Some of them a little too complicated there. Like
personal favorite, demons are known as, quote, Chaos Griblies.
The Chaos Griblies. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I like that they give them give all the groups nicknames as their form of identification. That's a great way to truly flesh out a character, you know, to put a little bit more into a character by having them give other characters nicknames. Really, it really gives a nice natural feel to it. And although it's a little bit on the silly side, from beakies to scrawnies, but then all of a sudden they switch over to fish heads and bug eyes. You know, not alliterative enough, I guess, not enough rhyming, but nevertheless, it really gives the Orks some more three-dimensional flavor to their characters and keeps them from being flat and stale in terms of their development and characterization.
We're going to kick things off with their thoughts on Humies, as by far there's more information about their feelings on them than any other faction. And by examining how they view our species, we get a good framework of Orky values that we can use to understand their relationship with Chaos and other Xenos.
The Humies.
You may be surprised to hear this, but the Orks are not particularly renowned for being especially deep thinkers. A fun fact, one of the things that starts to happen to them as they grow bigger from surviving a ton of battles is that their brains start growing as well, and also start thinking a whole bunch more, which is something that the Orks find particularly annoying. Since the vast majority of them will get killed before they ever reach what we would consider smart, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they don't really take the time to observe all of the different nuances between Humie factions. The Sisters of Battle, the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Navy, it doesn't matter. They're all just Humies to the Orks. This extends to even factions that we as the audience would consider so radically different that they're almost a different species entirely, like the cyborg tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or even the friggin' Gene Stealer cults. The former is just the Humie equivalent of mech boys to the Orks, and the latter is a bunch of funny-looking Humies with too many arms.
Interesting.
There is, of course, one major exception to this rule, and that's the Space Marines, or the Beakies as the Orks call them, due to the fact that the Mark VI Corvus pattern power armor looks kinda like a bird. The other most common variant of Space Marine armor has a faceplate that the Orks think looks like an orc when he's straining too hard at the drops. Which obviously doesn't make for a good nickname, so no matter what armor they're in, all Space Marines are Beakies. But we'll get into their thoughts on Space Marines later in this video. In multiple scenes throughout the Ork novels by Mike Brooks, and many codexes and campaign supplements from the last few decades, we get some direct quotes from the Orks that give us a lot more insight into their views here. From their perspective, Humies are kind of weird. They're fun to fight for reasons that we'll get into shortly.
Okay.
Culturally, they just do a lot of things that don't make any sense. Like, for
True.
example, one of the Orks' favorite pastimes other than fighting is looting. And when they end up stealing a Humie vehicle, their excitement of getting their hands on some new wheels is almost always soured by what they find inside. You see, Humies have this really annoying habit of putting all of their flashy buttons and lights on the inside of their vehicles, which, as every good orc knows, flashy gubbins are meant to go on the outside to show off to all the other boys. At least Humie vehicles normally have a good old-fashioned set of wheels or tracks that they ride around on, which is something that the orcs respect. But unfortunately, this isn't always the case. When they fight against the Admech, for example, or the Red Robes as they call them, their tanks float around like the vehicles of the Scrawnies, the Fishheads, the Tin Boys, and the Spikies. Now, some orcs believe this is why the Red Robes are so soft. If your ride isn't constantly being bombarded with bumps and shocks strong enough to compress your spine, you'll never be proper hard. Another thing that perplexes them about is that they all tend to drive on these big lines in the dirt called roads or bridges or some other stupid Humie word. They don't understand why they don't just drive wherever they want like the orcs do. Likewise, they have this hilariously weird habit of putting wheels on the doors inside of their ships and gargants, which, as every orc knows, you can't drive a door.
Yeah,
Humies just
makes sense.
Logical. Humies also have this weird invention called an alarm system. That's only purpose seems to be to get all of the Humies all riled up and scared before a fight. Why they would invent something like this is completely beyond them. Every self-respecting orc knows that before you get stuck in, you and the lads have to amp yourself up with some hooting, hollering, and a nice loud wah at the top of your lungs, not purposely induce feelings of fear and dread in you and all of your mates. Why they would make something like this,
that's actually interesting.
Buildings that contain all of their best loot is something that continues to vex the orcs to this day. Humies also love wasting time building things that don't seem to have any practical application, like libraries, schools, hospitals, or even cathedrals.
It's so alien to them.
Beings of logic like the orcs would never build anything that wasn't specifically going to be used in a fight. Weapons, armor, and even some of the weird mech boy inventions all had a purpose. But with Humies, 90% of what they made was practically worthless. At least when it came to their buildings, the Humies knew
wow, what a city.
That was something that the orcs respected. It made it more fun to knock them over. Now, although Humie cathedrals are a bit much for the orcs, all of the statues depicting the Emperor is something that they can at least wrap their minds around. Although they've never seen him, considering that he's normally depicted as being 100 feet tall with a giant flaming sword, he's clearly either the boss of all the Humies or their god. Either way, it would make sense to them that he told all of the smaller Humies to build all these things, and they have to listen to him because, again, he's the boss. Now, don't get it twisted. The god of the Humies in no way, shape, or form could stand up to true and proper gods like Gork and Mork. But so far as they can tell, if they ever manage to make it all the way to Terra and break into the Golden Throne, they're gonna get to fight a 100-foot-tall Humie. So that's something that all of the orcs are looking forward to. Now, it makes sense to the orcs that the Emperor is in charge, because based on all of the artwork they've seen, he's the biggest. This is how the orcs do things. The
right.
is the boss.
Right.
Not just because he's stronger than all of the other boys, but because orcs get bigger the more fights they get in. So a proper big orc has a whole bunch of experience and thus makes for a better leader. But
that makes a lot of sense, actually, how they perceive the God Emperor, because they respect the size. You know, if you're very large, that means that you put a lot of fights in your resume. They know that that you're capable of beating up people because you grew larger and larger with each victory, and so it makes sense that from their perspective, the God Emperor fought so much, he got real big, and the humans couldn't get big, so the God Emperor, according to the orcs' perspective, gave the humans the power to suit up and be able to fight to compensate their inability to grow big like they do. If I'm understanding that correctly, that's the way the orcs are looking at it. So even though they find humans very weird, they do have some modicum of respect in terms of when it comes to the fight. They do find a lot of the things weird, you know, from building buildings to alarms and of course putting in the the rotating locking mechanisms that look like a wheel to them, and of course the buttons. Why are there buttons? So many buttons. But when it comes to perception of respect, It looks like they do have crazy respect. They do have some level of respect for the humans because the God Emperor is very tall. Even though they don't, I don't think they know he's dead technically, and that he's just a corpse, a propped up corpse. but they, but they do see that, but because their whole entire logic, orc logic, is that if you're big, you're the guy, you're the boss. That's what they think they see in humans, that that they're beholden to God Emperor, because he's extremely big. And also, I find it very fascinating that every human faction that dehumanize themselves into becoming machines or something else that doesn't resemble human are still seen as humans by the orcs. They don't discriminate. It's like you're still a human. You're just as much a human as the that little soldier there with the gun, and the only ones that they don't call humies are the Space Marines, both the dark and the light versions. Well, I put light in quotation marks with that regard. That the beakies. Oh my gosh, the beakies and the chaos lads with spikes. That's crazy. I wonder. Well, he's probably gonna get to that. So let's continue.
Aside from the Emperor and the Beakies, all of the other Humies are the same size, so they're always arguing with each other about who's in charge. This is something the boys just don't really understand, and thus Humie hierarchy of command is still an enigma to them. What they think they should do is just fight it all out and figure out who's the biggest and strongest and make them the boss. But you gotta remember that Humies just ain't logical. They do things that don't make sense, and oftentimes it's better just not to think about it.
Yeah.
Also, in their defense, Humies are pink or brown, fragile and soft, not tough and green like the boys. And as Uthak pointed out in Brutal Cunning, they die a lot easier as well. If all of the Humies started fighting each other, they'd all just be dead, and then there would be no Humies for the Orcs to crump. They're too weak for that kind of thing. And since they clearly want to keep fighting the Orcs, they assume that the Humies have had to make a few sacrifices in this department for the greater good of fighting. Humies have a lot of faults, don't get it twisted. They do a lot of weird stuff that just doesn't make any sense, and they waste an enormous amount of time not fighting when they could spend time fighting. But even after all that, the Orcs absolutely love them, even if they would never admit it out loud or even understand their affinity for them. And that's for two major reasons. One, even though they're not as good at fighting as the Orcs, there's a lot of Humies. Now, we as the audience know that the Orcs outnumber the Humies some 1,000 to 1, since they reproduce so quickly.
Yeah.
But the Orcs don't know this. From their perspective, it looks like Humies are everywhere. They can be found in every corner of the galaxy. And no matter how much time they spend fighting them, there's always more Humies. Every time you kill
we really spread out.
show up to take their place. And honestly, you couldn't ask for a better trait to have in an enemy. And two, although admittedly inferior to Orc technology, the tech that Humies make is easily a close second, especially when compared to the strange, esoteric machines utilized by species.
I'm sorry, did I see this correctly? That mech not only has a building with cannons on top, but its legs are also buildings. Total metal. Hardcore, man. Hardcore. That's imagination. That's imagination in full power. Next level imagination going there. Dang. That better be playing some heavy metal opera music, you know. Not rock opera, not regular opera, heavy metal opera when it walks. Yeah.
Inferior to Orc technology, the tech that Humies make is easily a close second, especially when compared to the strange, esoteric machines utilized by other Xeno species. Humie weapons and armor are powerful, efficient, reliable, and most importantly, They look like what they're supposed to be. A gun looks like a gun. A sword looks like a sword. A tank looks like a tank.
True.
Now, compare that to all of the stuff used by the spikies and the scrawnies. Their weapons are dainty little things that no self-respecting orc would ever be caught dead wielding.
Interesting.
The only real issue that orcs have with Humi gear is that, quite frankly, it's boring. Humis are always unoriginal, and as a species, they fundamentally lack creativity. Their mech boys just don't have the pizzazz or flair of an orc mech boy, and this leads to all of their equipment looking exactly the same, meaning that none of them can ever tell whose stuff belongs to who. If you were to throw a whole bunch of orc guns into a pile, each of them would be able to tell immediately which one was theirs.
Usually because they're color-coded.
Which one they liked better. And then they could probably bash the true owner's teeth in and take it for themselves. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't a deal breaker for the orcs when it comes to measuring up whether a species is a good enemy or not. In fact, Humi gear is their favorite thing to loot aside from looting gear from other orcs. Humi gear is like a blank canvas that the orcs can work their magic on and make it proper orky. This normally takes the form of just gluing and welding a whole bunch of extra metal and scrap to them to make it for example,
not enough
power
cannons.
claws work pretty good. They're just unoriginal. They look like a big Humi hand and don't have, big metal claws on them like a proper power claw. But that's nothing that can't be fixed with a bit of orky ingenuity.
Fighting Uva-Gits. Fighting Uva-Gits. The Flash gets.
Okay, let's get into what everybody actually cares about. What do the orcs think of fighting against the Humis? How do they measure up when compared to every other species? Do the orcs love it or find them annoying? Are they the orcs' preferred enemy, or does that esteemed title go to a different faction? Honestly, fighting Humis is kind of a mixed bag for the orcs. They have some qualities that make them a great proper enemy, while other things, not so much. One-on-one, a Humi doesn't even come close to an orc. They're short, squishy, soft, and most of them are cowards, with of course the exception of old Baelai and the Beakies. They're proper hard. Humis are also just not really built for fighting. The orc's head is centered down low between their shoulders in the middle of their chest where they can keep it safe. But the Humis have their head on top of their shoulders, just waiting for it to get knocked off. That's why Humi dreadnoughts, knights, and titans look more like an orc than a Humi. If they were built like a Humi with their head on top of their shoulders, they would probably just wander around the battlefield all stupid-like until they got knocked over and killed. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Humi tech is not as good as orc tech. But the orcs will be the first to tell you that it's pretty damn efficient. It's good at killing, and at least most of their guns actually sound like proper Daka. Not that pew stuff that the fish
that's the important thing.
Scrawnies use, or the gross squishy things that the bug eyes fight with that aren't even actually weapons. Also, Humis almost always understand proper fighting etiquette, a rarity in the grimdark future. They tend to show up to the fight with a whole lot of boys for the orcs to crump. This is a kindness and a showing of respect that is not lost on the orcs. It's real neighborly of them, and the lads appreciate it. They don't differentiate much between all of the different Humi clans. They can at least recognize that certain groups of Humis utilize different tactics, strategies, and war machines, and that's something that the orcs appreciate. Every orc will tell you that variety is the spice of life when it comes to fighting, and the Humis, to their credit, do a pretty good job of always keeping things interesting. With them, you never really know what you're gonna get, even if some cowardly groups of Humis like to use long-range artillery to paste all the boys before the fighting even really gets started. That, admittedly, is something they find annoying. But even still, they recognize that this is only one Humi
No cheating.
tactic, and having a whole lot of different ways to conduct a fight is an important trait when measuring if someone's a good enemy or not.
The Tin Boys.
What about the Necrons, or the Tin Boys as the orcs call them?
I thought it was a whole new section.
Well, they're certainly a lot tougher than Humis. Most of them can take a hit without even flinching. And the best part about the Tinnies is that when you're done killing all of them, they'll use their reanimation protocols, stitch themselves back together, and stand back up. Then the boys can kill them all over again. Any orc who's ever tried to do this with Humis will tell you that it's not nearly as fun. Now that being said, no enemy is truly perfect, and the Tin Boys do have a few flaws. Although their tenaciousness is greatly appreciated, fights against them can start to feel kinda samey after a while. It all starts to get a little bit dull.
Oh, it gets stale.
Tin Boys are mindless automatons that fight in complete silence. No war cries, no screams of pain, nothing to get the blood pumping. They just don't have the passion for fighting like orcs or even some humies do. That being said, the tinnies do have some pretty great tech to loot. Sure, their tanks might float around and their guns may not be very loud, but they're proper killy and can unleash some pretty hilariously devastating effects on the battlefield. The orcs will routinely do everything they can to try to loot them.
Oh, that's
The only
epic.
problem
The
is,
fist bump.
most of the time, when they get into a fight with them, after they finish giving them a good kicking and the tins start to run for it, they and all of their equipment starts to fade out of existence, just completely disappearing and leaving no spoils for the boys,
Wow.
which is real sore loser behavior. This isn't exactly widespread information, but there are some orcs that know the secret, that the best way to start looting tinny gear is not to fight them. It's to sneak into their tombs while they're all still asleep. This is what the Death Skulls orcs of Wa Zort did a little while ago. Once they got inside, they proceeded to start looting like crazy, but their rambunctious enthusiasm unfortunately ended up triggering the tomb's reanimation protocols, and the boys soon found themselves surrounded by thousands of canoptic constructs. If far from being intimidated, the boys were absolutely delighted. They started scavenging and stealing like crazy, and ended up using all of the Tin Boy gear to cobble together hordes of cyborgs.
That's
and Vulcans
crazy.
and
What kind of
ever more
mech is that?
incredible super weapons, while also hijacking some Dolem gates to ferry in wave upon wave of reinforcements. By the time the fighting was done and Overlord Thamtak the Magnificent awoke to take command of his legions, he opened his eyes to the sight of an entire mob of leering mech boys standing over his sarcophagus, evil gleams in their eyes and revving power tools in their hands.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. They're just a walking smorgasbord of tech for the orcs. They're like, yeah, free loot. Even though the tech is not to their liking, it's the fact that the Necrons will just always continue and to fight over and over and over again, and they just like it. And they'll still take the tech anyway because why not? It's there. Why waste a good piece of tech, right? Why let a good piece of tech go to waste? Just improvise it to an orc. Make it an orc tech. Oh, dang. So, wow. It was freaking hilarious that they stood over the sarcophagus of that one Necron, the great Necron. Oh, man. But the funny thing is that since the tech disappears, they feel like it's a cheat. That's quite unfortunate. And those who know the secret, just go and infiltrate on a raid. Go raid a Necron. That's hilarious. That's hilarious how they see them, and I love the fist bump that they did with the Necron. It's like, yeah, we're cool. Oh man. So basically, any chance they could get the technology, if the technology is solid, they'll respect that too. And then we'll fight for that tech. Very that's pretty crazy, because they're very, very particular about the tech. They're very, very, very biased. You know, they like everything that makes sense to them, if it makes sense. So they don't just go and grab every single tech, because that would make them overpowered, even though they're already overpowered. The Fish Boys, Tau Empire.
Speaking of valuable tech and those who utilize it, the Tau, or the Fish Boys, have some of the fanciest tech worth looting, and their stuff is a bit easier to figure out than the Tin Boy machines. The orcs will routinely mock the Fish Boy weapons for not looking nor sounding like proper Daka, but none will argue their effectiveness. This often makes them preferred raiding targets for the orcs from the Bad Moon clan. For example, there was a massive colony seeding ship originally known as the Hope's Light in their fishy language that was captured by Megaboss Mokrog and turned into his looted flagship, now appropriately renamed the Tau Killa. The boss has now been using this to wage unending war on the Kalshan Sept for about 200 years. So yeah, they've got some pretty good stuff to loot. But when it comes to fighting against the Fish Boys, it's ultimately a pretty frustrating affair for the orcs. You see, the thing about Fish Boys is they really don't like it when you hit them in the teeth with a choppa. So they'll do everything they can to put as much distance between themselves and the orcs. This means that almost always, without fail, the boys will suffer unprecedented losses in the initial charge, and will almost never get the satisfaction of a good old-fashioned brawl with an enemy that actually hits you back when fighting against them. Now, you would think this would be something that would either cause them to change up their tactics or lose interest in fighting them, but it's not like that at all. They just accept that this is part of the territory with the fishies. Sure, it's a bit annoying, but the delay just makes it all the more satisfying when you do finally get your hands on the gits. Plus, the initial losses just mean that there'll be more fish boys to crump for all the boys that do survive the charge. They might put too much focus in their daka and negate the joy of variety in a fight, but at least the fishies seem enthusiastic and passionate about fighting in their own weird fishy way. The scrawnies, on the other hand, well, let's get into it.
The scrawnies.
Spikies, also known as
Hold on. So, wow, that was a little. That was pretty quick. So, yeah, they do have respect for the Tau, even though they don't like their hit and run tactics, because that's basically, if I'm understanding, is what the Tau does. They do hit and run tactics. You know, they hit them, they run back, and they just keep falling back. But eventually, once they close the Orks close the gap, that's when they start having the time of their life, and the Tau really actually starts fighting like they're supposed to, and giving them great pleasure, very great pleasure. They seem to enjoy the tech to an extent, but they just wish that it would make the daka noise. Apparently, the daka to them is like music is like actual music. You know, some kind of heavy metal music. They want to hear that a lot. You know, sort of like their war drums. The daka is their war drums. If they don't hear it, they're just pissed off. It makes them want to kill more. So we're dealing with the scrawnies, the Eldar. Why does that sound so familiar? Isn't that the name of the Coneheads? The husband from the Coneheads, Eldar.
The Eldari and the Drukhari are probably the most annoying of all enemies that the Orks routinely fight.
Okay.
Somehow, they manage to be even more cowardly than Humies, which in and of itself is at least impressive. For some reason that the Orks just can't wrap their heads around, the scrawnies seem to be more afraid of dying than any other species in the entire galaxy. Something about some pink god, it doesn't matter. They don't pay too much attention to any gods that aren't Gork or Mork, as the rest of them are just a bunch of wimps not worth thinking about. Besides, every Ork knows there's only two possible things that can happen when you die. Either nothing happens and then you're not bothered because there's nothing, or you go to the Great Green and meet Gork and Mork, who then subsequently reincarnate you back into the body of a new Ork, so you can go back to fighting and do it all again. Death isn't something that the Orks are afraid of. I mean, it's something to be avoided if it can be helped, but being afraid of it just ain't logical. Also, all of the scrawnies, be they pointy heads, clowns, or spikies, have this real undeserved arrogance about them that the Orks find off-putting. It's like they approach the galaxy as though it should automatically behave the way they want it to, and then they get very miffed when it routinely doesn't. Just like how the Humies do things the Orks find baffling, it's much the same way with the scrawnies, but somehow even worse. At the end of the day, for as cowardly, weak, and oftentimes stupid as Humies is, they at least kinda sorta function in a vaguely similar manner to the Orks. They're just really bad at being Orks. But the scrawnies go one step further and do things that actively annoy them. They follow the same path as the Tin Boys and the Fishheads, in that they make all of their trucks float around on grav lifts rather than being set on good old wheels and tracks. Also, if their guns do make any noise, it's all weird sounds that certainly aren't daka. A proper gun should have enough recoil that it almost breaks your shoulder with every shot. But just like with other species, every Ork that's ever fought against the scrawnies and lived long enough to have another go knows that looks can be deceiving. Just like their owners, scrawny guns are skinny, flimsy things that you could easily break over your knee without much effort. But they pack one hell of a punch. They may be weird and stupid looking, but at the end of the day, they're right killy. And from the Ork's perspective, that's something you gotta respect. Now, that's mostly just in theory, because when the Orks do actually get to fight against the scrawnies, and this goes doubly for the spikies, it's almost never as fun as it should be. They almost exclusively fight with hit-and-run style tactics, striking from the shadows, and only getting stuck in a fight they're 100% sure them and their mates can win without getting hit back. Now sure, if a line of boys and a line of scrawnies all charged at each other, both sides knew there was only one possible outcome, and it would involve the scrawnies getting a good kicking. But scrawnies didn't fight like Orks. They were always thinking about stuff. And the spiky ones had this annoying habit of laying traps to draw a couple of mobs off at a time and pick them off one by one, which was just rude. They didn't even give the rest of the boys a chance to get in on the scrap. Also, with the spikies in particular, they have this weird fascination with fighting things that can't or won't fight back. This behavior is anathema to the orcs. It's the equivalent of shooting at rocks, which, sure enough, could be fun for at least a little while, but the point of a fight was the fight, where your blood was pumping and Gork and Mork were roaring in your ears. It's not fun unless the other git is looking to take your head off in return. Further, the Spikies seem to take pleasure in not just killing and fighting, but actively hurting their enemies, even after the fight is done. Sometimes they would even try to capture their enemies, avoiding the fight altogether, just so they could hurt them. Now, torture is something that orcs just can't wrap their heads around. Why would you waste time poking at your enemy like this when you could just move on to another one and keep fighting? No self-respecting orc would ever engage in torture, not even to their worst enemy. The very idea makes them sick. Well, unless it was funny. Then they definitely would, and have many times in the past. But that's different. So the Scrawnies use tactics that aren't much fun to fight against, and since they're a dying species and all, there's not very many of them. Both things that don't rank highly when it comes to traits of a good enemy. So is there anything redeeming about them at all? Well, kind of, at least to some orcs. When it comes to looting, as I mentioned before, the orcs find the aesthetics of scrawny weaponry to be pretty off-putting, but they do respect its power. Likewise, they're fascinated by scrawny armor, as even though it's no thicker than an orc's finger, it's capable of stopping a bullet or a choppa just as well as a hunk of steel. It's way too small for the orcs to wear, though.
Yeah.
And even if they could fit into it, they know they'd be the laughingstock of their mates. So if they do use it, they have to bash it into the shape of something that's at least not completely humiliating.
That makes sense.
The rest of the Scrawny's gear, though, has a bunch of weird properties, like the ability to make portals or make things float that have no business floating. This loot is highly sought after by the mech boys, who will often pay a pretty hefty price for whatever boy manages to bring some in. So it at least has value in that aspect.
Ah, that's interesting. That's interesting. They're not so basically the Eldar's hit and run tactics pisses them off. The sound that the weapons make is off-putting. They don't have a problem with the armor though. They like it. They like the armor. So if they get their hands on the armor, even though they can't wear it, they can repurpose it and build it up in a way that that would satisfy them. But ultimately, the Eldar to them is very, very annoying. It's more of an annoying race to deal with when it comes to fighting. They just can't stand it. they just find them irritating. The bug eyes.
Now, the bug eyes, also known as the Tyranids, are probably about as far from scrawnies as you can get. Not only do they seem to love fighting, but there's an endless variety of different types of them. Not to mention the best part, there's a lot of them. They reproduce just as quickly, if not even faster than the orcs do. So when the boys find a planet currently being overrun by bug eyes, they know they're going to have more entertainment than they know what to do with.
Really?
There's just a couple of small issues when it comes to fighting them. First is that whereas the scrawnies think way too much, the bug eyes don't really think of much of anything at all. They're like big squigs in that regard to the orcs. The only thing they're concerned with is getting their teeth into their next meal. Now sure, sometimes they may look organized and like they're working together, but remember, looks can be deceiving.
Right.
All the boys gotta do is pop one of the big brain looking bug eyes and the rest of them go absolutely nuts, which, in fairness, is always good for a laugh. The second issue that they have with them is that there's just not much they can loot from them. All of the bug-eye weaponry isn't much use to an orc.
It's organic.
Fleshy, rotting organs and not proper Daka.
Yeah.
Now that being said, their teeth, scything talons, and chitinous armor plating can be fashioned into some pretty good gear with a little orky ingenuity. But most orcs prefer metal equipment, something the bug-eyes just can't offer them. Now, of course, fighting is what truly matters. No orc would argue against this, but looting is important too. If fighting was a cake, then looting would be the frosting. And everyone knows that cakes always taste better with frosting.
True.
Unless it's cheesecake, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a single orc out there that doesn't like fighting against the bug eyes, but some orcs like it way more than all the rest. The Snakebites, for example, a more primitive orc clan that follows what they call the old ways, enjoys the thrill of the hunt and routinely targets bug eyes and other big beasties as their preferred enemy type. There's actually one tribe of snakebite orcs in particular, known as the Worm Killers, that have taken this to an entirely different level. You see, at one point, this clan was fighting against the Bug-Eyes in some jungle on a backwater world where they discovered a big fleshy Bug-Eye spore. They brought it back to their fleet and cracked it open, and out came hundreds of tiny baby Bug-Eyes that quickly ran off in every direction. They would soon find that these creatures grew really quickly, and they were delighted to find their cruiser in a very short period completely overrun with them. No sooner had they bashed one in than another would appear out of a vent or a drain. Now eventually, the cruiser was completely infested and became the mirror image of the Tyranid-infested jungle from before. The only orcs that ended up surviving were these snakebites, who had become absolute experts in hunting these beasties.
Okay.
Eventually, they managed to kill all of them, and when they met up with a bunch of other orcs, they were absolutely covered from head to toe in Tyranid trophies.
Wow.
And had taken on the name Wormkillers. This experience had been so much fun for them that they decided to hunt down more of those spore pods, which they would then subsequently bring to new worlds, pop them open on their surface.
They remind me of the
leave
Predators.
for a few years, only to return to a planet completely overrun by Bug-Eyes. It was perfect. Not only were all of the humies that lived on these worlds super mad, which the Wormkillers found really funny, but now they had a whole new planet of Bug-Eyes to smash. Although exact numbers can't be confirmed, it's estimated that the Wormkillers have unleashed a Bug-Eye Armageddon on dozens of worlds, ensuring that they're never far away from a good fight.
So basically, it's Alien vs Predator, and they'll take those spores if they want, and deliberately create an infestation so they can manufacture their own WOG. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. And they got a whole elite faction specifically for Tyranids to enhance their enjoyment. And I guess that's one of the few times they'll actually side with the humans, with the humies, to fight when it comes to Tyranids, because they know that the humies will fight hard. And it makes sense that they wouldn't like the Tyranids tech anyway, because it's all bioorganic. You know, it's all biomechanical. There we go. It's all biomechanical. Very freakish use. No DACA involved. But they sure love the numbers. It seems like the bigger the numbers you can build, the more happier the orcs get and are willing to throw down and respect you. That's why they respect the humans, even though humans are small in numbers, because humans move all over the place. They always see a human everywhere. And so in this instance here, they want lots and lots of Tyranids, and if they see a planet full of them, they'll go right on in and have a Tyranid party. The Beakies. Here we go, the Marines.
Now, the Beakies are probably the most classic and iconic of all of the orcs' enemies, and it's a huge reason why they enjoy fighting against the humies so much. Pretty much every major weakness that the humies have when it comes to being a proper enemy, the Beakies have fixed. Humans by tradition are soft and cowardly, but Beakies are proper hard. In their armor, they're about on par with an orc in terms of size, durability, and strength. And maybe not a war boss or a knob, but at least your run-of-the-mill boy. They're also far more aggressive than regular humies, and are not prone to streaks of cowardice. Honestly, the way the orcs see them, the Beakies are more like them than any other living creature in the entire galaxy.
Got it.
They're like kindred spirits, so to speak. The Beakies understand
that
a
meme
fight is something you run towards and not away from. They're tough, strong, fast, and they'll keep fighting even after they've taken a good kicking. Not to mention, they've got good taste in both armor and DACA. Their bolters are good and loud, just like the orcs' guns, and their armor is much more well-made than all of that other humie stuff, making it some of the orcs' favorite equipment to loot. Now, it should come as no surprise that the orcs have a lot of respect for them, but they're not perfect. First and foremost, there's not nearly enough of them. Somehow, they might even be rarer than the scrawnies, and much to the orcs' disappointment, most of the time when they go to fight the humies, there isn't even a single Beaky to bash. Second, like I mentioned earlier in the video,
makes sense.
The orcs don't really understand the concept of hate. Anything they find annoying, they'll just fight. But the Beakies, on the other hand, seem to be entirely consumed by hatred for anything and everyone that isn't a humie. Hatred drips out of every one of their pores and motivates every action they take and decision they make. Now, sure, them being so hateful made them a bit more fun to fight, but some of the more thinky orcs actually kind of pity them in a way.
There
which
we
is
go.
another emotion the orcs aren't used to dealing with, and they find it annoying. You see, beakies are so consumed by hatred and an underlying bitterness that they're robbed of the joy they should be experiencing in a fight.
Wow.
It's like, dude, why are you so angry? We are actively engaged in the most fun thing you can possibly do, fighting. For the orcs to think that you need to take a chill pill is at least some kind of accomplishment.
Yeah, that makes sense, because for the orcs, it's all about the fun. It's all about the joy. The joy of shooting at the daka and hearing the daka sounds, feeling the rumbling wheels underneath the feet, the fighting part where there's where you just love the crunching sound of their fist in a face, and then all of a sudden they see the Space Marines and they just see sheer anger. There's no happiness in the fighting. They're like, why you're not happy fighting, and so on. What an interesting philosophical outlook on that. The fight is everything. The fight is joy. The fight is life. And to the Space Marines, that's not what that means to them. Fighting is just conquest. We hate you, and we are killing you. And for the Space Marines, they're probably wondering, well, why they probably think that it's barbarism what the orcs are doing, where the orcs see it as the time of their lives, a party, fun things to do. It's barbarism to the Space Marines, to the Beakies. So it makes them even more angrier, and they fight through that anger by way of that anger. And the orcs are baffled because the fight that the Beakies deliver is one of the best fights they could ever ask for, with the best armor, with the best daka, and there's no joy in it. That's an amazing contrast. Honestly. That's actually pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive to see two factions who live to fight, and one enjoys it and the other is full of hatred. Not the hatred of the fighting, but the hatred of their enemy. The orcs love the Space Marines with all their heart, but they don't realize that the Space Marines hate the orcs with all their heart. The spikes. The lads with the wind spikes.
The orcs don't really think much about the different chapters of Space Marines outside of the different color that they paint their armor. They do at least recognize that there's at least two different types of beakies, because the Chaos lads with the spikes have a completely different group of mates they pal around with. Now, all beakies are proper hard, don't get it twisted, but the Chaos beakies bring a lot more variety to the table when getting stuck in. Whether they be the blue weird boy beakies that cast all kinds of weird unnatural powers, the smelly green beakies that know how to take a punch, the strange pink beakies that, if I'm just being honest, the orcs find pretty weird, or their favorite, the red beakies that seem to love
because of the color coding.
The orcs do.
Yeah.
The major issue with them, though, is that the Chaos lads with the spikes do a lot of weird stuff. Not only that, they often seem to have an agenda other than just fighting. In a lot of ways, they're more like regular humies in that aspect and less like true beakies, at least as far as the orcs are concerned. When it comes to the Chaos gods themselves, they're not really worth thinking about. Even though Khorne is absolutely obsessed with the orcs, he finds them deeply fascinating and entertaining. No proper orc would ever for a moment consider worshipping a puny humie god. Gork and Mork were the only true gods any orc would ever associate with. Now, all that being said, in their defense, the Chaos Boys are probably the kings of variety when it comes to fighting. You never really know what to expect with them, and thus their fights never get dull. When dealing with the warp and all of the strange, unnatural things that come out of it, things routinely get pretty weird to say the least, especially when you're dealing with the Chaos Griblies, or the demons as the humies call them. They can show up seemingly out of thin air when you're stuck in a fight with the Chaos lads, or even when you're out in the warp minding your own business. The orcs view the demonic incursions of Griblies onto their ships as a good bit of sport, a fun way to pass the time on long journeys. And sure, Griblies are fun enough to fight, certainly is a nice change of pace between mutinies, but no matter how brutal and vicious they are, they're ultimately just not that satisfying to kill. When the orcs crump them, they just dematerialize, disappearing as if they were made of smoke. The best part of the fight is when you
that's not fun.
head, and and all the blood goes gushing out. They never get
Yeah,
that satisfying payoff.
they don't get the
Grizzlies, which ultimately just leaves
they don't
them
get the
pretty
kills.
pent up and frustrated. So most of the time, after they fight them, they just go back to fighting themselves. So the Chaos Lads with the spikes have their place in the hierarchy of enemies, just like the Gribblies and the rest of the species within the Milky Way. Unfortunately, though, there are some enemies that we know the Orks get stuck in with pretty frequently that have yet to be written about from their perspective, so we can only really speculate on how they feel about them. Now, hopefully when Games Workshop decides to flesh out the Leagues of Bouken, or the Stunties as they used to be called in old lore by the Orks, we'll also get a few stories from the Orks' perspective to see what they think about them. Likewise, the Custodians, who we can assume they would love because they're like bigger, harder beakies with way better gear to loot, would be right at the top of the list for the Orcs' preferred enemies. But as of the time of this recording, we haven't gotten a book that lets us see inside of their head while they're fighting against them, which is a real shame, and it's something I hope they correct in the future. But after all this, what do you guys think? Who do you think would be the Orcs' favorite enemy and why? Now personally, I'm leaning towards regular old Humies, as they've got the most history with them outside of the Necrons and the Eldar, but none of the boys today remember the war in heaven, and they don't keep written records. So from the modern Orcs perspective, Humies, or more specifically the Beakies, are the ones that check off the most boxes when it comes to traits a good enemy should have. If you like this video and you want to see more content like it, do me a favor and...
Alright. Yeah, I got my choice. So yeah, I agree that the Humies definitely would be the Orcs' favorites. I would put Tyranids on the second. I would put Tyranids second on that list in terms of the top two. Because of the fact that fighting is the key component, the joy of being able to fight, but also the numbers. The numbers they respect more so than anything. Well, I don't know if I think they respect the numbers more so than anything else, because the more numbers, the more to fight. The longer the fight, the more joy they get out of it. The more they get out of it, and the more that they fight within the WOG, the more they'll be able to, get bigger, because that's one of their big goals. You get the tech and you get bigger, and if you can't get the tech and get bigger, then it's like what are we fighting for? It's pretty much what they expect, and it's not easy for them. I guess it's easy, one would say. Depending on the engagement. I guess it's the rule of engagement that's the key factor. Because the way that everyone, it's like their initial impressions really hinges on what you bring. I'm trying to formulate here the understanding of where they went with the writing, because basically when having different opinions, having a character with different opinions, it's a very tough one, and it's got to be very clear and concise. And I can attest that from what WesHammer explained, it's very clear and concise, but it all has that one underlining factor. It's got to be a large crowd, and the text got to be good. That's the two things. That's the two things that they look for, and they have a loving infatuation with the Space Marines. But the problem is that they don't see the Space Marines a lot, so they get disappointed when they come across Humies. But when they do come across Humies, they do find joy out of it, because they know they're going to get different fighting tactics, and that's another key component to their happiness, is that the fighting's got to be unique. It's got to be an experience. It can't just be the same thing over and over again, which is one of the drawbacks with the Tyranids. Which is one of the drawbacks with the Tyranids, because even though they get the numbers, they don't get the tech. The numbers to help with their WOG, and they could grow big, but the tech is organic. It is biodegradable, and most importantly, the Tyranids' fighting patterns repeat itself, so it gets boring. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to grab a spore and use that just to, just to pass the time. To pass the time, just crack it open, and make it easy. Make it something to enjoy. The other factions is also interesting, in that, how you say, their fighting styles are. I would say anticlimactic. I don't think anticlimactic is the right word. It's insufficient. There we go. It's very insufficient. They expect a lot. They want a lot. They want a lot. They want things like this. This fist to the face from their opponents. They don't want hit and run tactics. They want to feel that punch. They want to feel the crunch. They want to feel the meat and potatoes. When they see the blood pour out, they want to see it pour out. The Tyranids can satisfy that because when they squish those bugs, guts fly all over the place. Humans, same thing. Humans are very squishy. And humans are always willing to take the squish, just so they can be able to exert their dominance in the universe. To exert their dominance in the universe. What else? What else? They need their Daka sounds. The Daka sounds to them is like war drums. From what I gather, if they don't hear the sounds of Daka coming out of guns, which for many of the other races is all pew pew, it disappoints them. I don't think it disappoints. It weirds them out. It weirds them out. Sound is such a fascinating thing to them, especially the the sensation. Trying to formulate it properly, I would say that the sensations, the stimulations, there we are. They need to be stimulated. And if they're not stimulated when they're fighting, they don't lose their edge. They just lose the interest. Well, they don't lose the interest either because they'll still fight anyway. It's just that their perceptions shift. You know what I'm saying? Their perceptions shift if their stimulations are not satiated. Their whole entire mission is to beat up people, kill as many as they can, take the tech. Very simple, very straightforward. But they don't want. But it seems like they want to earn it. From what I'm understanding, they want to earn what they're fighting for. That's like their commodity. You know what I'm saying? That's their commodity. That's their cash. You want to earn your cash. For them, they want to earn what they see. And they want a good fight to earn it. Whether they live or die matters not to them so long as they have the fun. As long as they earn their fun. And they know they're going to have fun in some manner. And the tech adds to the compensation for as a reward for what they've done. Let's see here. Like this, the scrawnies just doesn't grab them. Factions like the scrawnies and the fish heads. It's too sleek for them. It's not rugged. And their fighting tactics just doesn't help out in one bit. It doesn't help them out in one bit. And this is actually pretty good writing, I gotta say. Excuse me. This is very solid writing for the Orks. It's pretty impressive. They just have they don't have a one-track mind. They know what they want, which is really good. They have their motivation. They know what stimulates them and satisfies all their emotional content, their needs. And to see how they handle every single one, they'll fight everybody. You know what I'm saying? but the satisfaction is like a meal to them. It's like fighting the scrawnies is like having. I'm trying to. It's like having Vegemite. To them, it's a Vegemite, while fighting the Humies is like having a slab of steak. There we go. There we go. If we want to do the food analogy, fighting someone like the Scrawnies or the Fish Heads is like having a Vegemite, but taking on someone like the Humies and the Tyranids is like having a nice steak. A nice steak and pork chops. There we go. Steak and pork chops. They are what they eat, and they eat the aura of the fight. And they definitely have a hard-on boner for them Space Marines, especially the Chaos Space Marines. They just don't understand why the fight, the expressiveness of the fight is that of anger and hatred. It baffles them. It baffles them, and I like this. I love how this was all written out, by the lore masters. They did a good job, and I'm sure it's the same thing too. There's probably I'm sure there's other videos like with the Eldar's perspective and so on. It's very easy. It's very easy in writing to lean into the humans and have what humans think of the world, but to get the aliens' perspective, that's a high level writing. And one good example I can cite, honestly, is Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where we get the aliens' perspective. One well known scene is Garrett and Quark having a conversation about what's going on with the war. The Cardassians are getting pummeled, and Garrick is like, gosh, man, my people are suffering. And Quark is sitting there in the bar talking about how he's having a hard time running his bar because of the war. And he hands him the root beer. And the two of them start having a whole conversation, using the root beer as an analogy for the humans. And they sit there like, oh no, this root beer, I don't know. And Quark is like, go ahead, try it. And he gives it a try, and he's like, ew, it's vile. Like, it's a horrible taste. Like, that's fantastic. And that's when Quark makes the analogy, the comparison of the root beer to the humans, about how it's so cloy and sweet, saccharine, And Garrett caught on and understood the critique of the humans. It's always good writing when you have multiple aliens to really have the alien perspective of humans and other species as well, other humanoid species, to help give them more depth and three-dimensional aspects. And doing that with the Orks, who, for all intents and purposes, again, could have been phoned in and just be a bunch of rampaging berserkers, a bunch of barbarians, to give them, opinions of the other humanoid races, really makes them even more interesting, more fun. You understand what they're finding the fun in with the other factions, and when you get to see the fights, it's more entertaining and more enjoyable. Knowing that if it's a Space Marine, you're gonna get an epic fight, but if it's an Eldar, you're gonna get weirdness. Like, you're gonna see brutality, but it's gonna come with confused looks from the Orks, like, huh? Where's the Daka? or see them getting bored fighting the Tyranids over time because it's just wave after wave of endless bugs, and they get tired out. That's solid. That's solid. So, good video from WesHammer. Very good video. Loved it. Loved it a lot. So, head on over to Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com and grab yourself a copy of The Impossible Man, a strange fantasy novel written by me. You'll find links to the book below, along with links to other merch such as pins, stickers, t-shirts, music. Enjoy the products. Thank you for your patronage. And if you did a lore video on The Impossible Man, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your analysis and thoughts. And if you're interested for more research videos, you can head on over to my live multi-stream on Twitch and Kick every Monday through Thursday, 10 o'clock p.m., where I do Japanese cultural research. Plenty of lore videos like here today, and gaming if you enjoy video games. I look forward to hanging out with you. So until the next Warhammer research, thank you all for joining me, and I wish you all a good night, buenas noches, and oisuminasai.